What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki coming at you with another video. I know I'm running late on this one, but I decided I still wanted to go ahead and do the review for chapter 328. Sorry for the delays. You guys know my life has been a little busier lately for those of you who've been keeping up. So, with that said, diving right into the chapter though, we get that flashback to a month before where we are currently in the story. I don't need to say much about Mr. Give Me Some Females, prisoner D69. That hasn't been said already. Will say that it is nice to know that Stain doesn't play that. His priority being information shows like that level-headedness, and it kind of highlights again that Stain isn't just quite like some villain and never was purely just a villain. Especially when you meet him in My Hero Academia Vigilantes, he was kind of like a more harsh, extremist vigilante zealot, and he takes on the role of a villain moreover to create the best ideal society that he sees fit. He moreover sees himself as like an anti-hero or beast, which is kind of confirmed when he finds the guard that's, you know, laid up, crippled, injured and dying, and he tells him directly that he wants the world to be a better place, but he's a monster. It's almost as if he views himself as a necessary evil to make the world be a better place. That said, we get his perspective on All For One's big speech and how you could see people already kind of moving forward and like borderline worshiping him, only for him to do, like I said he did back when we first found out, and for him to dive and swim from Tartarus to the land, swimming several kilometers. So that wasn't, just some walk in the park. The guy swam a couple miles from the prison to land and walked, it seems, to whatever base he has in the area. And of course we get the whole monologue with him dedicating it all to All Might. We finally get to see Sukauchi after a while, and obviously he's been working pretty much non-stop along with Sansa, the cat cop that has been around since the USJ attack. New scar for him. Main thing that we get taken away from here is that the data that Stain had was essentially a log of the events of the prison for the impulse waves, or the electromagnetic waves, radio waves that they were sending back and forth. And it let them decode it and understand that one of the waves gave the specific message of, make him complete in 38 days. Which lets us know then that it has been exactly 35 days since Tartarus was broken out of and all those people free. And we know that was towards the end of March, but we were told it was April during the last act begins. So we know that Deku was out and about for about a month. And we know that it is now like early May, which basically times this event and the potential raid that they're going to go on to try to get into Tartarus to find all this stuff out. It basically kind of ties all this in with the anniversary of the USJ attack. You could argue that the fight between Class 1A and Deku was timed around there, especially since you do have the callbacks. But either way, this is around the time of the USJ invasion. But I don't see it going, quite the same way as far as, especially with them being the ones launching the attack this time. With that said, I do think that this puts Shigaraki back in a position for us to finally figure out exactly what's going on, because it also clarifies that All For One's verbiage back in the chapters when he was like, it's as if they shared a mind, was because it indicates that they do not share an actual mind, but rather they just happen to have the ability to somewhat communicate. And that's kind of highlighted when All Might kind of talks about how like being in physical contact kind of gave him these like feelings and like sensations, but it didn't quite explain things directly, so they still have to fully communicate. This also further confirms, for those of you who have been here for a long time, the Unholy Trinity theory video that I dropped, where I pointed out that Shigaraki, the Vestige, and All For One kind of work as a perversion of the Holy Trinity. If you go back and watch that video, you'll notice that the thing that I pointed out is that the Vestige for One and All For One have different dialogues, and the way they talk is just slightly different. And it kind of shows that the Vestige for One does have a bit of his own autonomy outside of just what All For One could potentially want, which means the Vestige's mindset and All For One's mindset and Shigaraki's mindset can all be on 3 different pages. Just something that you want to think about going forward in the future. because I don't think that passing on your quirk, even if there's a piece of your consciousness in it, counts as being able to pass on your entire existence. So All For One would be fully aware that his original body and true self still died. So I don't think that that's necessarily what he's been grooming Shigaraki for. However, the quirk itself does have the ego, All For One itself, with having him as its user for so long, has been heavily imprinted with his consciousness. And if it develops its own ego, will gladly, if possible, keep perpetuating itself more than likely. So Vestige for One has an ambition that goes beyond what All For One himself likely knows, if we constantly see a Vestige for One intervening. But if Vestige for One is really going to be on the same page as All For One, then likely, when we have these conversations about how All For One, didn't want to take Gina's quirk because it didn't fit Shigaraki's disposition. We have these dialogues about how Shigaraki had to have gotten his quirk from All For One, or sorry, the quirk that Shigaraki uses has to have been extracted from All For One while he was in prison due to the timing, since he was still collecting quirks for Shigaraki at the time of Kamino. We got a lot of potential sparks here just off that alone, and what we get in the last couple pages of the chapter. Shout out to Singapore. Big Red Dot is very clearly named after their town's like big name or whatever. Singapore is known as the Little Red Dot. As such, him being the Big Red Dot is more of a just like a kind of like a nod to the real world naming, and of course, to add on to that, him being a lion man is a reference to the fact that in Singapore, their animal, like national animal, is the merlion. So he's very much supposed to be kind of like a symbolic of their cultural icon. He does make appearances in the third My Hero Academia movie. I have not gotten to see that yet, but I do plan to. And so I'm looking forward to seeing some of that. Give this guy in action, and more than likely he will get to come in. With Salam being, the top hero from Egypt, he's also a character that has appeared in the My Hero Academia movies. I think at this point, not only factoring in with Mid-Gauntlet and with us getting the introduction of these characters, on panels as if we've already been familiar with them or interacted with them, I do think Horikoshi is at a point now where I'd already felt like he was writing his story where you could not have seen the movies and you could still enjoy it, but we are at a point now where he's also saying, yeah, but if you watch the movies, you're going to understand a lot of these things better, and these interactions are going to help play into what we get into the story later. So going ahead and making sure to enjoy stuff like School of Briefs and Vigilantes, these tangential series and events do seem to be having information that is relevant to the story. So I just recommend you go ahead and be open-minded enough to check those out. I've got to catch up on my School of Briefs reading, but that's a whole other thing. And then lastly, we get to talk about the last bit where we focus on somebody who professes to be the student of All Might is on her way. Now, the number one hero from the United States being a hotshot, ready to go, rare and action-packed, eager fighter is not a surprise. It's kind of reflection of our international policy throughout history and the way the world sees us. The thing about Stars and Stripes is, while I've seen a lot of people arguing about whether or not she's going to die or not, I'm actually going to tell you right now that I expect her to die. I expect her to be food for Shigaraki. I don't think that means she'll be a bad character. I think there's a lot of potential to open up her story, because one of the things that sticks out to me is that Deku talks about that video that he used to watch about All Might, and he says, 10 years ago was like the debut of All Might, blah, 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 which to me means that All Might spent about 20 years being a hero in Japan when he had One for All, and another 20, that first 20, he might have been in the States most of the time, and that would also give him time to develop these relationships with all these other people. Like not just David Shields, but it would actually completely justify him having like a sidekick in Star and Stripe, somebody that he would have likely raised up and helped train. Now, there is a scenario where she's kind of like the evil Superman trope, and she's not actually trained by All Might, and moreover, she's just super obsessed with him. And therefore, she's, going to end up lashing out when she doesn't have his approval, which means that more than likely, if she finds out about One for All in this angle, she's going to want it, and it could lead to conflict between Deku and her. To a certain degree, I could argue that the previous arc kind of even potentially hinted at these discussions coming up when you have, you know, Mount Lady and Edshot and Conley Woods kind of, you know, with a little bit of friction towards the way Endeavor and and Hawks and Genus were approaching the situation with Deku. So when you look at it from that angle, you have reasons for her to potentially be at tension. It's worth noting that we've once again got another blonde character after the introductory phase of the saga, as we're looking at potentially raiding an underground prison to combat a science experiment. So this is very much given the vibes of the overhaul arc, which means she's very much looking to be like another Mirio to me, where she's going to come in and try to challenge Deku. And the difference between her and Mirio here is going to be that while Deku was willing to give up the quirk to Mirio ultimately in the end, and she's likely going to at least lose her powers, it's worth noting that unlike then, Deku isn't going to be sitting here telling himself he's not good enough, more than likely, but instead because he's been able to achieve full 100%, and he's got that responsibility to be the last owner regardless of how he feels about himself, due to the fact that he cannot give one for all to somebody who does already have a quirk. He now is obligated to figure out how to make this work. He's got the confidence, and more importantly, he's got a conviction and a reason that goes beyond just whether or not he feels like somebody else can do it. He now has to do it. He's not necessarily the chosen one based on everything, but he's the obligated one. That's just how it is. So whether or not Star and Stripe actually is a student of All Might doesn't matter too much. It just kind of like, if she isn't, it increases the odds of her being a little crazy and just like an ultimate fanatic. And it's worth noting that during the first movie, David Shields said that, you know, around the world, the U.S. had like a 20% crime rate, and that was considered one of the better times. So I also expect her to be more than willing to like catch smoke and drop bodies, just because when you've been fighting way more, this idea of it being like a hard fought battle, this isn't the same Japan, you know, Heroes from Japan, where it's like more casual. And, you know, it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, they got to have like this air of peace. Heroes in the U.S. are consistently fighting for their lives. This is like everyday business, and you can tell that she's kind of used to having to get around quick, because she's standing on the back of, you know, stealth bombers. These are the kind of jets that can easily break the speed of sound. So you could argue that she's not only on her way to Japan, but there in within hours, because she's in a mock jet bomber. So we could easily see her leading the raid in the next couple of weeks or next couple of days, especially when you factor in that she's ready to go. She wants to take out Shigaraki. We got All Might being ambitious. And while some people are, I know, because of that whole, Horikoshi thought the LS Act could be 5 volumes thing. This is the same dude that thought the sports festival was going to get to be 10 chapters. I'm not worried about that. This raid is likely going to be the event that leads to Deku really having to flee for real. And Class A is probably going to have to help him escape, and that's going to be the way he escapes, is via his friends. And whether that means he's going to end up having to sacrifice a lot of what we consider like the fodder of 1A or not, I don't know. But because I don't think Horikoshi is trying to be that dark with the series in that regard. But I do think that this is going to be a catalyst towards separating Deku potentially from Japan, setting up the death of All Might, closing the plots of Gran Torino, officially putting and setting Shigaraki up to be a successful villain, and then also have, you know, his plan and what Horikoshi has planned for the story going forward fully kind of starting to get fleshed out more and more. Because look, I'm gonna be honest with you, I expect there to be plenty more content to go into. So just let me know what you guys thought about this chapter. I'll see you guys pretty quickly, because I'll be doing the Church of MHA Sunday, but still wanted to make sure that I actually did a video for you guys, because you know, tragedy is important in my life, but I need to make sure that I'm still providing for you guys and looking out for you, especially those of you who've been supportive. So appreciate that. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Like, subscribe. If you're really feeling generous, you can go ahead and share or join. Just see y'all Sunday. I'm Monarchy, and I'm out.